5 minutes. That's how long it took from the moment my wife stepped out of the truck, duffel bag in hand, boots hitting the gravel like she was still aboard the USS Truman, to when the red and blue lights lit up our front yard like a damn 4th of July show. 5 minutes between homecoming and confrontation. And if you've never seen a homeowner association president try to have a decorated naval officer arrested on her own porch, well, let me walk you through the madness. I had just opened the screen door when I heard the squeal of tires. My hands still smelled like oil and pine sap from replacing the fence post out back. There she stood, Karen Miller, all polyester authority and tight curls, her clipboard clutched like a holy book, flanked by 2 neighborhood patrol volunteers in neon vests. She walked up our drive like she owned it. Behind them, a county deputy pulled up slow, uncertain. My wife, Laura, blinked against the midday sun, her uniform sharp, her face still sunburned from the carrier deck. She smiled when she saw me, that soft smile I hadn't seen in almost 2 years. Then Karen stepped between us. "Excuse me, ma'am. Can you state your name and reason for being on this property?" Laura stared at her like she'd stepped in something wet. "I live here," she said, calm, even. Karen clicked her tongue and turned to the deputy. "She claims to be the owner, but I've checked. This home has been vacant for over 12 months. That violates residential occupancy clauses. We have reason to believe this is an unlawful re-entry, possibly squatting." The deputy looked at Laura, then at me, then at the clipboard. His hesitation burned. "She just returned from deployment," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is her home. Her name's still on the deed." Karen cut in, her voice all sugary venom. "With all due respect, Mr. Harlan, we have documentation from the Homeowner Association that suggests otherwise. We've been monitoring this property for months. No activity. Trash left out. Yard not kept up to standards. It's now flagged for reassignment." "Reassignment?" Laura's voice dropped an octave. Karen turned to her, smiling like a vulture. "In accordance with community preservation policy, unused properties are temporarily transferred under Homeowner Association supervision until verified ownership can be established." That's when Laura stepped forward. Not rushed, not aggressive, just steady. She reached into her bag, pulled out a sealed folder, and handed it to the deputy. He flipped it open. Military orders, her ID, deployment records, a letter from the Navy about her return. He scanned it for a moment, then looked up. His expression changed. "Ma'am?" he said slowly, adjusting his belt. "On behalf of the county, welcome home." Karen's smile twitched. "Deputy? This isn't about the Navy. This is a civil matter." "No, ma'am," he said. "This is your problem now." The deputy tipped his hat to Laura and walked back to his cruiser. The HOA volunteers shifted awkwardly. One tried to look like he was reading his wristwatch. Karen stood her ground a second longer. "We'll be in touch," she hissed, then turned on her heel. 5 minutes. That's all it took, and I knew, deep down in my gut, this wasn't over. That night, Laura sat on the back porch, staring at the tree line where the sun bled into dusk. Her duffel still unopened. Her boots still on. They tried to erase me," she said, "like I'd never lived here." I sat beside her, the wood creaking beneath us. You're home now," I said. They can't touch that. She didn't answer. Just watched the shadows lengthen. The next morning, the trash bins were gone. Our mail hadn't come. And someone left a note taped to the mailbox. Unauthorized occupant reported. So, no, it wasn't over. It was just beginning. And if they wanted a fight, I had 2 years of silence, waiting, and rage to let loose. I spent the next day rebuilding the fence. Not because it needed fixing, it didn't. But my hands needed something to do before they curled into fists. The morning air still carried the heat from yesterday's tension. Laura stayed inside mostly, not saying much. I caught her once by the window, her silhouette framed by morning light, arms crossed, staring at the empty mailbox. Just before noon, a truck pulled up. Not ours. White, unmarked. 2 men stepped out in polos and slacks, the kind of corporate casual that reeked of passive aggression. One held a measuring wheel, the other carried a clipboard. They didn't knock. They didn't ask. They started walking the perimeter of our property, dragging that wheel through the dirt like it belonged to them. I stepped out. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The one with the clipboard gave a half smile. "Routine assessment, sir. Property compliance audit. Requested by the Homeowner Association." I let the hammer rest on my shoulder. Funny? No one mentioned a compliance check when they were accusing my wife of squatting. The man's smile didn't waver. "Just following up, sir." Laura stepped out behind me. She wore jeans and a gray tee, her hair pulled back, face unreadable. Her voice, though, sharp as a snapped cable. "You can follow up somewhere else." Clipboard guy blinked. The one with the wheel paused. I'm a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy," she said. "This lands under my name. You're trespassing." They hesitated. One checked his phone. I caught a glimpse of the screen. A text message. "Don't argue, just log footage." "You're recording?" I asked. The guy with the wheel looked uncomfortable. "Only for documentation purposes." I stepped closer. "Delete it." They backed off fast after that. No threats, no shouts. Just a polite retreat, but I knew they'd be back. Karen didn't lose quietly. She tested fences. If one held, she looked for cracks. That night, someone turned off our water. We had pressure in the pipes when we went to bed. But by morning, nothing. I checked every valve on the property. Nothing. Then I saw it. The lock on the community line had been changed. HOA territory. Laura stood by the edge of the driveway, watching me fume. They want us gone," she said. "Not just out, erased. They can want all they like." But deep down, I felt it. They weren't playing checkers. This was a slow siege. Later that week, a delivery truck pulled into our drive. Driver looked confused. "Got a return pickup," he said. 2 units, AC system. "We didn't order anything," I told him. Names on the invoice, Karen Miller. They were trying to strip our utilities, one part at a time, bit by bit, like termites. Then came the letter. Not from the Homeowner Association, from the county. It said our occupancy was under review due to complaints of prolonged abandonment, code violations, and unauthorized use of utility resources. Laura read it twice, folded it with surgical precision. "They forged the reports," she said. We had 10 days to respond. 10 days to prove we belonged in the house we never left. That night, I sat alone in the garage, staring at a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside, an old camcorder, dusty and clunky, from back before phones did everything. I remembered using it when we first moved in. Laura laughing in the backyard, her boots in the dirt, her hands in the soil, planting that damned stubborn rosemary bush that refused to die. I plugged it in, hummed to life. The tape spun. Maybe they wanted to rewrite us out of this place. But I had footage. I had proof. Still, I hesitated. Something about this didn't feel like a war to be won with facts. They weren't after the truth. They were after the silence that followed. The third morning started with silence. No birdsong, no wind, just that strange vacuum before something snaps. Laura stood at the sink, staring into the drain like it might whisper a solution. Her duffel was still unopened. I noticed that when I stepped out to get the paper, out of habit more than anything, it wasn't there. Instead, a single flyer was stapled to our gate. Yellow paper, black ink. Community preservation alert. Unauthorized occupant detected. Pending eviction review. No name, no seal. But I knew exactly where it came from. Karen had changed tactics. She wasn't sending HOA volunteers anymore. She was planting seeds in the neighborhood, the kind that rot quietly. That day, 3 neighbors passed our driveway without waving. One of them, Bob from 2 houses over, even turned his face away when Laura waved. And they're not bad people, I said. They're just scared. They're cowards, she answered. Not with venom, just disappointment, the kind that weighs heavier than rage. We went to the county records office that afternoon. No surprise. There was a temporary hold placed on our parcel, flagged by a third-party claim of community possession. No details, no signatures. Just the word processing. The clerk, a woman named Tanya, lowered her voice when she saw our names. "You need to talk to Jack Holloway," she said. "Old veteran, used to sit on the HOA advisory, got pushed out last year. He knows things." Laura raised an eyebrow. "Knows what exactly?" Tanya just nodded. "All of it. We found Jack at the local VFW post, hunched over black coffee like it owed him money. He was a wiry man, skin like old parchment, eyes like flint. When Laura introduced herself, something shifted behind his expression. "Nash, you're the girl who married the fence guy," he said. Then, to me, "Still staining cedar like it's 1982? I almost smiled. He didn't waste time. They did the same to my wife, only slower. Turned her garden into a drainage easement. Claimed it was for safety. When she fought back, they revoked her guest privileges. HOA can't ban people from their own homes, but they can starve them out. Block the access points, bleed 'em dry." He pulled out an old map, hand-drawn, faded ink. Before the HOA formed, this neighborhood was platted under a different charter. This lot? Yours? Technically, it falls under what used to be called a resilience buffer, land intended for returning service members after Vietnam. HOA never filed to revoke that zoning. Laura leaned forward. "You saying they don't own the right to manage our land?" "I'm saying they're squatting on a legal fiction. And if you're smart, you'll flip the narrative." That night, I walked the boundary lines with a headlamp and a fistful of red flags. Every 15 feet, I marked the line Jack showed us. It was petty, maybe, but it felt like reclaiming something. When I came back inside, Laura was at the kitchen table, writing. Not a complaint, not a legal brief. Orders. Don't laugh, she said, glancing up. But I'm drafting a mock operation plan. For what? For reclaiming occupied territory. She was half smiling, but her eyes were dead serious. She called it Operation Echo. That night, someone threw eggs at the front of the house. Not teenagers. Too precise. 2 on the door, 1 on the window. Message received. I cleaned them up without waking her, but I couldn't sleep after that, because if they were escalating, so was I. We launched Operation Echo the next morning. Not with loud noises or confrontation. No, that wasn't Laura's style. It started with a rake, a flag, and a clipboard. She changed into a plain blue jacket and khaki pants, something that made her look more school principal than officer. Then she walked the property perimeter with the same deliberate stride she must have used on the flight deck. Slow, commanding, absolute. Neighbors peeked through blinds. I could feel the air change. At every flagged point, she planted laminated signs. Federal Resilience Zone. Entry restricted without authorization. Beneath it, in smaller print, see Title 38, Chapter 37. Was it legally binding? Maybe not. Was it technically accurate? Enough. But the real power wasn't in the text. It was in the posture, the performance, the dare. By noon, 2 HOA board members showed up. Not Karen, not yet. These were the mid-level types, sycophants. One was a guy named Randy. I'd gone fishing with a couple times back before all this. He stepped up, forced a smile. Hey, neighbor, just wanted to check in. Saw some new signage go up. Laura didn't blink. Correct. Well, it's creating some confusion. You know, we've had residents asking whether they can still use the jogging path. She pointed to the map Jack had helped us redraw, freshly mounted in a frame beside our gate. Jogging path is on common land. This isn't. The other guy, Stuart, I think, shifted from foot to foot. We just want to keep everything friendly, you know? Laura's voice was calm. Then stop trespassing. They left fast. I could see them muttering in the driveway. Stuart took a photo of the map before getting in his car. That evening, I found Laura sitting in the barn, sharpening a pocket knife that hadn't seen daylight in years. I leaned in the doorway. You expecting them to storm the gates? Not yet, she said. But I want to feel ready. That night, the water came back on. No explanation. No notice. Just a quiet restoration, like the enemy had pulled back for a breath. But in the morning, the mail came, and with it, a letter. This one was certified, signed by Karen herself, elegant stationery, gold trim. The text was pure venom under perfume. Dear residents, as per community statutes, failure to maintain architectural continuity and authorized signage may result in disciplinary action. Your recent installation of unsanctioned signage constitutes a breach of Article 4, Section C. You are hereby given 72 hours to remove said signage or face formal review. In service of harmony, sorry, Karen Miller, president, Homeowner Association. Laura didn't laugh. She didn't even frown. She folded the letter once, then again, then used it to level the corner of the table. Then she said, "Time to escalate." We printed 20 copies of the Federal Resilience Zoning Flyer and taped them to every post along the old community boundary, the one Jack had drawn out for us. Then Laura added one more sign at the entrance to the subdivision. Afinsek, this zone may be subject to federal exercise under Title 10. Residents advised to remain alert. No one knew what it meant. That was the point. That afternoon, we received a surprise visitor. Sheriff's Deputy Brooks. Young, buzz-cut, polite. He removed his sunglasses before speaking. Got a complaint from the association about impersonation of federal authority, he said carefully. Laura stood, handed him her Navy ID. Brooks studied it, then exhaled slowly. "Ma'am, you're the real thing." "Yes," he nodded. "Then I'd advise the association to pick their fights more carefully." He left without asking us to remove a thing. That evening, the sun dipped low, casting the flags in long shadows across the yard. I watched Laura from the porch as she stood by the rosemary bush she'd planted years ago. She knelt down, pulled a single weed, and whispered something I couldn't hear. The next morning, someone had spray-painted our fence. Fraud. This time, Laura didn't flinch. She fetched a brush, painted right over it, then added something new above it. Our veteran-owned. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield had shifted, and now it was ours. It was Friday when Karen herself finally showed up. Not a letter, not a proxy. Karen in the flesh, standing at the foot of our driveway, like a statue erected to passive aggression. She wore a cream-colored blazer and heels, like she was heading to a fundraiser, and had taken a wrong turn into our world. Laura saw her first. She didn't say a word. Just wiped her hands on a rag and walked out the front door, boots thudding against the porch steps. Karen raised a hand in greeting. "Lieutenant," "Ms. Miller," Laura said evenly. Karen's smile was surgically sculpted. "I do wish we could have spoken under less adversarial circumstances. I'm sure you understand that order and appearance are cornerstones of any healthy community." I stood behind Laura, silent, watching, listening. Karen continued. "You've created quite the stir. Some of our residents feel unsafe, misled. There are concerns about unauthorized military activity, flashing of ID, intimidation." Laura crossed her arms. "Showing identification isn't intimidation." Karen stepped forward, dropping her voice like she was offering a secret. "Look, off the record. This doesn't need to escalate. Just take down the signs, remove the flags, come to the next board meeting. We'll work something out. Quietly." Laura didn't flinch. "This isn't about signs. You tried to erase me, pretended I didn't exist. You filed false claims to the county." Karen blinked just once. "That's a serious accusation." "You made it serious." For a moment, I thought Karen might break posture. But she recovered, turned to me. "Say, Mr. Harlan, you've always been so cooperative, reasonable. Surely you don't want this to become a legal matter." I smiled. "Funny. That's exactly what I want." Karen left in a huff, shoes clicking too fast. But her shadow didn't. That afternoon, Laura's Navy contact emailed. Somebody, anonymous, had requested verification of her service record. Twice. Once from a local watch group, the second from an HOA-affiliated subcommittee. They were probing, trying to find a crack. That night, we met with Jack Holloway again. He brought a folder. Inside, printed screenshots, emails, HOA meeting minutes going back 6 years. He'd been collecting, watching. They keep their real records off the books, he said. But they slip, especially when they think no one's looking. One email stood out. A message from Karen to a man named Curtis Vale, marked confidential. Occupant's spouse re-entered zone. Possible jurisdiction conflict. We need leverage. Explore asset freeze. Jack closed the folder. They're not just coming after your house. They're coming after your name. Laura sat very still. They want to make me a liability, she said. That night was the first time I saw her cry since she came home. It wasn't loud, just a silent unraveling. She sat at the kitchen table, fingers pressed to her eyes, shoulders trembling. I stood by the door, helpless. There was no comfort to offer, only witness. In the morning, she was gone. Not far, just the barn. She'd set up her old cot, cleared a space. She said she needed distance. Not from me, from the house. I don't want to be where they see me as a threat, she said. The next 2 days passed in eerie quiet. No flyers, no visits, just the waiting. Then came the packages. 3 large boxes, dumped at our gate. Inside, boots, rations, training gear. All surplus. No sender, no note. Laura stared at them. They're mocking me. I disagreed. It felt more like a warning. That night, I sat beside her in the barn. We didn't talk much. Just passed a flask back and forth, like soldiers on a ridge. I thought coming home would be the easy part, she said. No, I said. It's just the next battlefield. She leaned back, eyes on the rafters. They can't make me disappear. Not again. I didn't answer. I just reached over and took her hand. Because some wars, you don't fight with fists or facts. You fight by holding on to chuchao. To each other, to memory, to truth, and I wasn't letting go. Sunday morning came with fog so thick it blurred the fence line. I stepped outside with my coffee, and for a moment, the world felt paused. Quiet, neutral. Even the birds stayed low. But the illusion didn't last long. There, nailed to our mailbox post, was a laminated notice. White background, red border, bold print. Official community cease and desist. Failure to remove unapproved installations will result in property injunction. Below that, someone had scrawled in pen, "This is your final warning." It wasn't signed, but I knew Karen's handwriting like I knew the shape of our shovel handles. I took it down, walked it inside, set it in front of Laura like a calling card. She read it, said nothing, just folded it in quarters, then slid it into her duffel like it belonged there. A trophy from a war still waging. That afternoon, she walked the boundary again. This time, she wasn't planting signs. She was taking notes, measuring, timing, observing. Her eyes moved like a sniper's. At one point, I saw her pause at the south edge, where the old trail ran near Karen's side property. She stood there a long time, head tilted like she was listening for something the rest of us couldn't hear. Later, she drew out a diagram. A layout of the area. Paths, fences, old access points. She pointed to the edge of our land. That corner, she said, it's technically a utility easement, shared ground. We don't own it, but neither do they. I leaned over the map. What are you thinking? She tapped the paper. We take control of what nobody claims, and we make it ours. Not by law, but by action. That night we started building. It wasn't much, just a frame, a tent, a series of sandbags and painted signs. But we did it fast, under floodlights, our boots stomping in rhythm like we were back on a base. Jack showed up halfway through with a thermos of coffee and a roll of caution tape. You're gonna make her lose her mind, he said, grinning. That's the plan, I told him. By morning, the easement had been transformed. It looked like a forward operating post. Neutral colors, barriers, an improvised command tent with one chair inside. On the fence hung a large painted board. Veteran Support Zone, Operations in Progress. And, above it, in smaller letters, by entering, you consent to recording and tactical simulation. Neighbors came out to look. They didn't speak, but they didn't tear anything down either. Karen didn't show that day, but her car passed the corner 3 times. By sunset, we'd added a camo net, a pair of reflective vests, and an old Marine radio tuned to static. It was absurd. It was brilliant. That evening, we grilled hot dogs in front of the post. Laura laughed for the first time in weeks. Not a soft laugh, a real one from the gut. I hadn't realized how much I missed that sound. Jack sat on an overturned bucket, watching the sky. She'll come tonight, he said. She'll send someone first, try to bait you. He was right. At 1:14 a.m., motion lights snapped on. Someone was at the post. Laura and I were already watching from the porch, blankets over our knees, coffee in hand like it was a stakeout. A man in dark clothes crouched by the fence, fiddling with the sign. Laura didn't shout. She stood up, walked out, slow and silent. Evening, she said, voice like a warning shot. The man bolted. But not before I caught a glimpse of his HOA volunteer badge slipping from his vest. He ran across Karen's lawn, straight to her front door. Laura walked back and sat beside me. Tactical simulation, huh? I said. She smirked. Live training now? I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear, from momentum. Something had shifted. We weren't just holding ground anymore. We were reclaiming it. The post held for 3 days without incident. Then came the drone. It was just after sunrise. Laura was tending to the rosemary bush. Yes, that same stubborn patch she'd planted years ago. When I heard the buzz, high, sharp, synthetic. We both looked up. There it was, gliding just above the roofline, blinking red. A camera lens on legs. Karen, I muttered. Laura didn't flinch. She stood slowly, wiped her hands, and walked back inside. By the time I caught up with her, she was already flipping through a drawer. What are you... Interference protocol, she said, pulling out a black sheet. It was a jamming net, old school, low tech. She climbed onto the porch roof, calm as you please, and draped it like she was hanging laundry. The drone buzzed erratically, then veered off toward Karen's lot. It didn't come back that day, but something else did, a certified envelope, hand-delivered by a man in a gray suit, who said nothing and left without a word. Laura opened it at the table. I stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. Petition to suspend occupancy rights. It read, filed by Homeowner Association President Karen Miller. The document was a tangle of citations, quotes, bylaws, all wrapped around one idea: that Laura's return created an environment of disruption, that her presence was non-compliant with the communal expectations of tranquility. It wasn't a legal eviction. Not yet. But it was a gauntlet. Laura didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "They're testing the perimeter of what I'll accept." That afternoon, she called her old CO. Not to complain, not to escalate, but to ask for language. Precise, technical wording. For operational boundaries and jurisdiction references. She rewrote the signs. Clean, direct. No flair. Just facts. Just law. The next day, a man in a pickup stopped at the post. Civilian. Looked like he ran a contracting business. Said his name was Kyle. He'd been asked by the Homeowner Association to inspect for unsafe structures. Laura didn't argue. She handed him the same folder she'd handed the county deputy weeks ago. Her orders, her ID. Then she asked, "You here to inspect or intimidate?" Kyle looked at the papers, then at her. "I'm just here because they paid me." She nodded. "Then go earn it somewhere else." He left. That evening, I found Laura back at the post. She was alone, but not idle. She'd built a small raised platform covered with a tarp. On it, a clipboard, a logbook, and a placard that read, Observation Point Alpha, report anomalies, sign below. She was inviting the neighborhood to participate, to witness, not by confrontation, but by curiosity. By morning, 5 signatures were in the log. Jack came by later with a six-pack and a grin. "I think you've officially got more foot traffic than the HOA office." "Good," Laura said. "Let them see us. Let them ask questions." But Karen wasn't asking. She was watching. That night, Laura sat with me on the porch, silent for a long while. Then she asked, "Do you think I'm becoming the thing they fear?" "I thought about that." "You're becoming the thing they can't control," I said. She exhaled, long and slow, and somewhere across the street, a light went out. The next morning, the flags were gone. All of them. Every boundary marker, every laminated sign vanished without a trace. No wind, no storm. Only one new thing appeared. Spray painted across the fence of Observation Point Alpha. You lost." Laura stood in front of it, eyes narrow. She didn't reach for paint. She reached for her radio. Then she said, "Call everyone." I knew what that meant. We weren't reinforcing anymore. We were going offensive. Jack arrived first. Then Kyle, the contractor who'd walked away earlier in the week, pulled up in his dusty pickup with a thermos in one hand and a folding chair in the other. Behind him came Tanya from the county clerk's office, off-duty and curious. By noon, the patch of disputed ground outside our fence looked like the early stages of a pop-up festival. Camp chairs, coolers, a folding table. Even someone's kid set up a lemonade stand. But this wasn't a party. This was a front line. And Laura stood at the center of it all, not as a protester, but as a commander. She called it a readiness drill. Informal exercise in civic awareness and land use observation, she explained to a man with a camera. He wasn't press, just someone from town who'd heard rumors. He didn't ask questions. He just filmed. People like him always did. By 3 p.m., Karen arrived. She didn't come alone. 3 board members flanked her. Men in tucked shirts and expressions so tight they looked constipated. She marched up the sidewalk like she'd been summoned to a royal inspection. "Otzes, this is illegal," she hissed before anyone could greet her. "Unauthorized assembly, trespass, disruption of community peace." Laura stepped forward, calm, tall. Her voice carried. This is a permitted exercise under local ordinances governing shared use easements." Karen laughed. "Permitted? By whom?" Laura didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because Tanya, from the clerk's office, stood and waved. Me on my lunch break. Karen's face turned the shade of a sunburnt tomato. She stepped closer to Laura, lowered her voice. "You're destabilizing the entire neighborhood." "No," Laura said. "I'm stabilizing my place in it." That night, no one went home. Jack brought lanterns. Kyle set up a fire pit. It was quiet, respectful, and firm. An encampment not of rebels, but of watchers. I sat beside Laura, watching her scribble in the logbook. "Are we winning?" I asked. She shook her head. "There's no such thing here. There's only holding on." Around midnight, the sprinklers came on. Controlled irrigation, aimed right at the easement. People scattered, chairs toppled, gear soaked. Karen's retaliation was cowardly, but effective. By morning, most folks had gone. Tanya left a note. "Call if you need me." Kyle left a tarp. Laura stood alone beside the soaked table, her uniform jacket dripping. Then came the final blow. A city vehicle pulled up. A man with a clipboard stepped out. Got a removal order," he said. "Someone filed a complaint with photos. Says this is an unauthorized structure. Violation of sightline ordinances." Laura nodded. "Who signed the complaint?" He checked, paused, then showed her. Her own name, forged. Someone had submitted documents using her credentials. Karen had crossed the line. That night, Laura didn't speak. She sat in the barn again, staring at her boots. I tried to talk. Nothing came out right, so I left her alone. Until morning. When I woke up, the barn door was open, and observation point Alpha was gone. In its place, stacked neatly, were pallets of training manuals, laminated schedules, folding chairs, every piece of evidence folded, labeled, and boxed. A sign leaned against the gate. Phase complete. Stand by for evaluation. I found Laura inside. Clean uniform on, hair tied sharp. They wanted escalation," she said. "We'll give them inspection." And then she showed me what she'd spent the night building. A formal complaint. Not to the HOA, not to the city. To the State Board of Veteran Affairs, with attachments, including the forged documents, and an official request that our property, originally zoned as Veteran Reserved Transitional Land, be reassessed for exemption from HOA oversight under the dormant, but still active, Section 45B. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just said, "It's time they answered to someone else." The waiting was the worst part. Days passed like molasses, slow, sticky, and a little bitter. The barn became Laura's office. She kept to herself, communicating in short sentences and decisive nods. I gave her space. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. Then one morning, the call came. She was already at the desk sipping coffee out of her old steel mug when the phone buzzed. She answered like a soldier reporting in. Lieutenant Harlan. I couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but I saw her back straighten. Her hand gripped the edge of the desk. Then slowly, as if afraid to hope, she sat back down. Understood, she said. Thank you. She hung up and looked at me. It's happening. I didn't ask what. I didn't need to. The next 48 hours were a blur. An unmarked vehicle pulled into our driveway. 2 inspectors stepped out, one in boots, the other with a notepad and a state badge. They asked for documentation. Laura handed them everything: the forged complaint, the drone, video, the signed letters, Jack's zoning map, and the sealed request under Section 145B. They didn't blink, just nodded. An hour later, they walked across the street to Karen's house. She wasn't expecting them. We watched from the barn window as she opened the door in slippers and a robe, her face blank, her hand covering the bottom of her mouth, like it might stop the truth from escaping. They spoke for less than 10 minutes. Then they handed her a yellow envelope. She didn't close the door. She just stood there, frozen. That evening, Laura opened a bottle of something aged and quiet. She didn't toast, didn't smile, just poured 2 fingers into 2 glasses and handed me one. Fleisch effective immediately, she said. Our land is reclassified under independent transitional status, meaning, the Homeowner Association no longer has jurisdiction. We sat on the porch in silence, watching the flags flutter on our repaired posts. I noticed neighbors walking slower. Some waved again. Some just stared. Jack came by at sunset. He looked at Laura, then at me. You know what this means, right? It's over, I asked. He shook his head. No. It means they'll write you out of the rule book next time. Quietly. Erase the whole chapter. He wasn't wrong. Karen never came to our door again. But a week later, we noticed her house listed for sale. By the month's end, a moving truck rolled out. No goodbyes, no letters, just absence. The space where Observation Point Alpha once stood, Laura turned it into a raised garden bed. She planted rosemary, tomatoes, squash. Things that take time. Things that need attention. She called it ground echo. Every morning now, she's out there before the sun. Boots in the dirt, hands steady. I asked her once why she didn't rebuild the post. Didn't replace the flags or signs. She smiled, just barely. Because they already know where the line is now. And just like that, we weren't fighting anymore. We were living on our land, by our terms, together, and sometimes that's the loudest kind of victory there is.